Let me start on that breaking news from Northern Ireland. DCI Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot multiple times in daylight in front of a significant number of children that he had been coaching football. It was claimed immediately by something called the real IRA. It was, of course, duly condemned and held to be exactly the problem with the nationalist community in the north of Ireland that reactionaries always held. They just couldn't stop killing, you see. 4 Republicans were immediately arrested and were held, but have now been released unconditionally. 4 other men are now behind bars for this heinous attempted murder. All of them are Protestants. One of them is a known and significant Loyalist figure. And that begs a number of questions. Is the real IRA a false flag to begin with? Was the claim by the real IRA that they had carried out this attempted murder just a false flag operation? Or were the Loyalists trying to kill this very senior Northern Ireland Police Service Detective Chief Inspector? And if so, why? Some Loyalists have been threatening the police officers in protest at the Northern Ireland Protocol, which Rashid Sunak, the British Prime Minister, hopes to have resolved with the Windsor Agreement. These Loyalists have condemned King Charles for meeting with the head of the European Union as part of the agreement. Begging the question, who are these Loyalists loyal to exactly? If they're not loyal to the United Kingdom government, if they're not loyal to the King of England, to whom are they loyal? And will this be the moment when this story develops that the British say, we've had enough of your loyalism? We'll see about that, and the mother of all talk shows will, of course, keep abreast of this highly important and fast developing story. Meanwhile, here in Scotland, where I live, we are praying for the victory of the wee free Christian fundamentalist candidate. The wee frees are so austere, their main problem with having sex standing up is that it might lead to dancing. They are the descendants of the most extreme Calvinist Puritans that it is possible to imagine. And as someone from a Roman Catholic background, you wouldn't expect me to be hoping that their candidate, Kate Forbes, currently the finance minister, comes out on top in the race to fill the vacancy dramatically created by the rapidly departing Nicola Sturgeon. I wonder what she's running away from. Perhaps we'll find that out too over the next few days. Kate Forbes is at least sane. Kate Forbes can at least count numbers. As the finance secretary, she knows her arithmetic. At least we must assume so, though she's in a government that has cost the Scottish taxpayer, for which read British taxpayer, because most of the money that the Scottish government are spending comes from taxpayers in places like Bradford or Bethnal Green, both of which I represented in Parliament and are both considerably poorer than the Scottish people that they are subsidising with their taxes. But if Kate Forbes does not win, we're going to have the fundamentalist of a different kind, a man called Yousaf. I wonder how Joe Biden would react to that. An Indian in Downing Street and a Pakistani in Bute House, where incidentally he'd be opposed by the leader of the opposition, who also originates in the Punjab. What a change in the top of the British political class. Once upon a time, we thought we should rule India. Now Indians are ruling us. But of course, as someone who's represented more people from the Indian subcontinent in Parliament than any other person in the history of Britain. My problem with Hamza Yousaf is not that he is a Pakistani, of course, nor that once upon a time at least he ran with what you might call the Al-Qaeda brigade as a pretend Muslim fundamentalist. But in fact, he isn't that either. He is the living embodiment of the great Groucho Marx joke, I have principles, but if you don't like them, I have others. Hamza Yousaf is anything that you want him to be. Thus, he can pretend to be a loyal fundamentalist Muslim and be a supporter of men being able to declare themselves as women, just at the wave of a flaccid penis. Hamza Yousaf missed the vote on these things in Parliament, having 6 weeks prior fixed a meeting with leaders of the Pakistani community. His fellow members of the Scottish Parliament accused him, almost certainly correctly, of seeking to dodge the vote. But now that he's running for leader, he cannot dodge the issue any longer. Did he plump for the Muslim side of affairs, or did he plump for the transmaniacs? Of course, he plumped for the transmaniacs. Not because most people in Scotland feel that way. The vast majority of them do not. But it seems the vast majority of SNP members who will be picking the new First Minister of Scotland do feel that way. And Kate Forbes, the Christian fundamentalist, is being slaughtered because she has remained true to her beliefs, whilst Hamza is the India rubber man, ultimately flexible. He'll be anything that you want him to be. But that's not my main problem with him either. My main problem with him is that he is a creature of the moral swamp, the swamp created by the Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu, although the roles were reversed, who have ruled Scottish politics for the best part of 15 years, counting the deputy premiership of Nicola Sturgeon, followed by 8 years in the top office. They are a total, complete disaster, unable to, ride a scooter and chew gum at the same time. They cannot deliver anything that they promise. Indeed, they falsely promise. Bikes, laptops for every child in Scotland, anyone. They cannot deliver ferries, which now have cost more than the building of the Scottish Parliament itself, and still are years away from being seaworthy. They handed off to another dodgy Indian, Mr. Patel, potentially billions of taxpayers' money for an aluminium smelter which is yet to smelt and will never smelt, if I'm any judge. It smells, though, to high heaven, like so many SNP scandals. But of course, of more immediate concern to more people is the revelation in the Daily Telegraph today of the state of complete chaos, if not culpability, in the deaths of thousands and in the waste of hundreds of billions of taxpayers' money and the wrecking of the British economy, represented by the lockdown presided over by the cast of Billy Smart's circus. Boris Johnson's Billy Smart's circus, although there was nothing smart about it. The WhatsApp chats between Boris Johnson and MattHancock, the then health secretary, later denizen of the jungle in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. I bet he wishes he could be got out of the front page of the Telegraph today, because it is perfectly clear, including from his ghostwriter Isabel Oakeshott, that Hancock is being sized up for sacrificial lamb. But in truth, they should all be on trial. They set off on a course of action which destroyed the economy, which devastated the lives of millions of people, even though their WhatsApp chat makes clear that there was no medical or scientific evidence behind any of the courses of action that they followed. and their cavalier ha-ha-ha approach to the doling out to cronies, friends, even relatives of undreamt of taxpayers' treasure in the totally wasted track and trace and other schemes of procurement of health and safety equipment. The ha-ha-ha approach they took to the development of a vaccine which, let's just say, at the very least has been oversold, has not lived up to its billing, are all utterly damning of the Boris Johnson government. The more so because his performance on COVID was supposed to be one of his selling points, one of the reasons why we should think we might have to have him back for the Tories before the next general election. Not that long away, less than 2 years from now. The revelations in the newspapers are utterly damning of the government, but they are utterly damning also of the opposition, which supported every single twist and turn of the government's disastrous policy on COVID-19 and on lockdown. Indeed, was often to be found egging them on to an ever more savage and draconian approach. Just to give you a couple of examples, it turns out that school children were only required to wear masks because Nicola Sturgeon had forced Scottish school children to wear masks, and Boris Johnson opines on the WhatsApp that it isn't worth the trouble of resisting this because the nationalists will merely seek to make political capital out of it. Therefore, children were traumatized wearing masks that everybody knew they did not need, and moreover, as again the WhatsApp chats make clear, the people at the top knew that the masks weren't any good, not just for school children, but for the rest of us. A second example, though time is against me giving more, a second example is that they acknowledge that there was absolutely no medical or scientific basis for the rule of 4, for the rule of 6, particularly amongst children. Amongst children. Many children lost an entire year of games, of sport, of football, and of other extracurricular activities when it is clear that the leaders of our government knew that it was absolutely unnecessary. And perhaps most devastating of all is that the WhatsApp chat proves that if you were over 80 with complicating factors, you had a 6% chance of dying from COVID. That's if you were over 80 and, for example, obese or with other complicating factors, you had a 6 in 100 chance of dying from COVID. But as the government makes clear repeatedly in these chat messages, if you were young, your chances of dying from COVID were, and I quote, the Prime Minister, the Chief Medical Officer, and the Secretary of State for Health, your chances of dying were, quote, negligible. So for a negligible risk to the people under 80 with complicating factors, we have utterly destroyed our economy and scarred and traumatized our children and many, many other sectors of our population. There'll be much more in the next few shows about this because we're going to have to revisit it. But for now, I rest my case. Boris Johnson and his government should be on trial for negligence and malfeasance, something I said from the very beginning of the emergency. Only time for a few minutes on what has been the most remarkable, surprising, but politically important poll that we have ever done. It only went out at near midnight last night. Many of my colleagues did not want to pose it. Usually it's my editor who picks the poll, but I picked this poll. I could tell that many of my colleagues didn't think that it would fly, that nobody would want to identify with Vladimir Putin. But the poll that we launched less than 24 hours ago, if you had to vote for one of them, would it be Putin or Biden? A, Putin, B, Biden. Almost 20,000 people have voted. And the show's only just begun. And at the moment, it is 81% for Putin, 19% for Biden. On Twitter, on YouTube, it's 97% for Putin and 3% for Biden. And the others, I'm sure, are going to reflect similar numbers. After this very short break, we're going to talk to the man who taught me more about the Middle East and the Arab world than any other person alive today. He is Dr. Man Bashir, one of the great Arab nationalist leaders, and now leading the campaign to have the sanctions on Syria lifted. A noble cause and a most honorable guest. Stay tuned for Man Bashir right after this.